When it comes towards business acumen, it's not something that someone just wakes up and they get. You have to practice, you have to learn, you have to improve. And on today's episode, we're going to talk to you how you can improve your business acumen skills and help you to be more customer centric and to get more opportunities top of funnel. Check it out. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist Podcast. I'm your host, Donald C. Kelly, the Sales Evangelist. And I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And on this episode, I have a fantastic guest. Her name is Candace Taber, and she is a friend on LinkedIn, and I highly recommend you connect with her. She's going to share with us some insights and ideas that can help us to improve our business acumen as sellers and as sales leaders, and just overall how we can be more effective in our communication with our value, about a value proposition, top of the funnel, and throughout the whole sales cycle. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, know the show is designed to do two things. One, help you to 3 to 5x the sales pipeline, and two, help you to close more deals. As we go into the conversation today, we're going to break down some simple things that you can do, practical ideas to make sure you improve those business acumen skills. Candace, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me, Donald.
Of course, I'm really looking forward to your insights because this topic is one that I feel that I've spoken about it, but I haven't had anyone to come on a show to talk about it, if that makes sense. It's something I know it's important, but how do we go about doing it? And I think that's where the tactical side comes from. And I'm really looking forward to getting your insights on it, some guidance here. But before we dive in, why don't you take a second or two and tell us a little bit more about you and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Candace. Who I am, a wife and mom, and I've got a whole list of things that I would say, make me who I am. And my current assignment is around sales enablement, particularly sales leadership enablement. So taking that enablement, priority and perspective, but taking it up a notch by making sure our leaders are equipped, because leaders are force multipliers, and enablement really should start with our leaders.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more on that one. Well, there's several parts that come back from this. Like we know when it comes to enablement, some organizations take it seriously. Some organizations think sellers should come with that knowledge already. And I feel that that's silly. I feel you got to make sure you provide that help for them. What's some of your thoughts on that? Because I feel that there's an opinion there when it comes towards making sure that from the leader perspective, that you provide that enablement. Why is that so critical from your perspective?
I think a lot of times companies, right, they think that they're going to get a head start by having someone who has expertise, but they may have, some training or some sales experience, but ultimately what they need to know is how to do that well in your environment, right, or with your business. And so I think it's part of a really good employer is going to understand that part of the value exchange is we equip and enable our employees. That's part of showing that we're committed to the value exchange, we're committed to your performance. We want to set you up for good performance, and to do that, we need enablement. We need to make sure that we have a path for you to go on, and we want to make sure we also have feedback of what's working, not working, and where we can help. So I do think that that's something that if you want to be a good employer, part of your value exchange is that you're providing enablement, you're equipping people for how you're asking them to show up and perform in your environment. That's your part of the relationship.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Love it. Well, one thing that we need to make sure that they enable their team members on, and it's this concept of focusing on the buyer. Not so much just like a general sense of focusing on the buyer, but coming from the buyer perspective, and especially if you're going after any deals nowadays, you have a panel, you have a board, you have a group of people, a committee that you may need to work with. And in that committee, inevitably, you're going to find or come across someone that's an executive. Speaking executive language requires to understand business acumen, and also to be able to create good top of funnel, like a value proposition, requires that. So I want to talk to you about that today and learn about how you help the leaders or the organizations to be able to develop their business acumen skills. And if there's several things that you could point out to us today to help us, that'll be money.
Yeah. I think one of them is to start by asking questions. And so especially if you're reaching out to executives. I think one of the things you want to learn first is, what are executive priorities? So how you start to dive into business acumen around executive priorities is, look at your current industry trends, what's happening in the industry, and get a sense for that. But then you also want to know, within the size of your company or with the company that you're reaching out to, what is the role responsibilities of the CEO? What do you see around their job descriptions? Looking into those things and connecting some trends and dotted lines to start to build that familiarity or a hypothesis around the business acumen. And so executive priorities are really going to be high level strategy. And so when you're reaching out and trying to build top of funnel, you want to make sure you have your language right, because you're meeting people where they are. So
Yeah.
executive level priorities are about taking the time to refine what you're saying to them, right? Are you saying something more particular or tactical? Are you saying something that's more appropriate for a director level or a manager level within that, that size of company? And are you saying something that's appropriate to that role? And the big thing is, are you saying something that is a hypothesis and a point of view rather than an assumption? And the reason why I say there's a difference is because having a point of view and a hypothesis is great, because you're really looking for a reason to be relevant.
Mm.
When you're assuming, you typically, that reads as arrogant, right? And so when you're giving out that assumption, the first thing we're going to do as a human being is get a little defensive and go, well, what do you know about my business? Right. And it takes away and it sets up defense mechanisms, even for executives. I mean, executives have defense mechanisms too. We're all people. And so I think the way through that is having a point of view that's about being, again, that reason to be relevant versus, and a hypothesis versus, I'm assuming you have a problem. Because
Mm.
if I assume your problem without confirming it or aligning towards it, I'm really I'm going at it arrogantly rather than going, I did my research, I have a viewpoint on your business. Does this resonate with you? Because then I think we can get into a place where we're discovering and getting curiosity, versus now we've got defenses up and we're kind of going back and forth and trying to now, power through a wall or a hurdle of defense.
How might I word that though, if I'm reaching out to an executive and I don't want to come across, and I want to come across more effectively. How would I position my messaging?
Yeah, I think it's more, Donald, when I was looking at, trends within your industry and kind of your current executive, potential, when I was looking at trends within your industry and what's going on, I'm curious with a company your size, if you're seeing X, Y, Z. And the other thing is, I'm wondering if this resonates with you, because I was wondering if this is something that would match a priority that I've seen with other, CEOs or executives. So I think what you're laying out specifically is, here's what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
This may be affecting other, CEOs in your business segment, but does this align with you?
Mm.
And it's not that I didn't do my homework. I'm going to give something specific, but I'm wondering, is this resonating, right? Like, I'm trying to be more curious than I am assuming you have a problem and I need to fix your business.
Yeah, and what I like about this idea is you come across as that consultant, as that expert, as some industry, we like to call it industry authority leader. Like if I can look at you and I
Yeah.
see you as an industry authority figure, then money in the bank. You make sense. You're granted time to spend with me because you know something that I value or could value. And yes, it
Yeah.
could be a priority for us to, I don't know, like expand, right? It could be something that we want to do over the next couple of years. And you probably read that or saw that somewhere, heard me talk about that. But is that a priority right now? And I love where you're coming at
Yeah.
with, like, finding out for me with that curiosity level. is that resonating? And yeah, it was resonating, because I'll give you an example. We were talking to this company to do some marketing stuff with us, and it was resonating, and it was initiative, and everything lined up. However, we went dry for like 3-4 months with the process, and it's because things shifted. It's not that I don't want to do that,
Mm-hmm.
it's just things shifted to another even more pressing thing, and I
Yeah.
was able to
Yeah.
help that seller, help them understand that, and it made a big difference in the value that they're able to then offer to us. But you got to come with that type of approach, and I like it.
Yeah. I think to your point too, they have capacity for a few initiatives, right? Because you have to think, if you're top level and you're strategic, your initiatives are broad. And then each level you go down in the organization, they work to more tactical operational implementation pieces. So when you're an executive, and depending on how big your business is, you may be concentrating on, a few higher level OKRs or, executive objectives per halves or quarters, right? Depending on their business. And so some of those things that you may point out just move a little down the line. So even if it's not a priority, you confirming that it's something that's on an initiative or on their radar can also put them in your pipeline for nurturing, right? Or for when that priority comes up. It's a matter of, okay, if not now, but it's in the back of their mind, then I can put it out into potentially a later stage deal in the year, or keep it in stage one and nurture it.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the other things is understanding, executive priorities and OKRs, getting familiar with them from different executive level roles, help you connect directly to who you're reaching out to. Because even if you're not reaching out to a CEO, you may be reaching out to a CHRO,
Hmm.
right? And OKRs may look different for that. They do typically on the people side of the business, but again, those top level, priorities are higher, strategic, and there may be four core ones that they're used on. They're focused on for the year. You want to confirm what's their priority there and where that can sit into, just facilitating your conversation and in between motions for your funnel or pipeline.
I'll go back to understanding the priorities again. There's probably several things you can do, and I think that comes back with that curiosity. In your experience and with your team that you work with, is there anything that you can do, you see best to help identify those priorities? You mentioned a little bit maybe about initiatives, and maybe if it's an enterprise level organization, publicly traded, perhaps they have like earning statements and whatnot. Are there any other ways that I can improve
Yeah.
my business acumen, to know what could be a priority?
Yeah, I think you want to dig for that kind of information. You want to dig for any operational material that's on their website, right? Any operating plans, depending on, if the company's privately held, you may not find some of those things as accessible, but you can still look for things around the industry, around the company that you can observe what I call, you know, behaviors and business acumen trends, where you start to see what's shaping up an industry and what could affect the business. And then behaviors, if there's anything interesting happening with employment or, um, HR or things around personnel within that industry that could, be in connection with that company, or even not directly in connection with the company correlation. Look for the things around earning statements. Look for if there's operational objectives in play. Sometimes, even going back to a website and looking at the core values as a company,
Mm,
and then writing down some sample statements on, if this is your core value, here's why I can make a hypothesis about, a potential executive strategy would be, right? Like, so
yeah.
if one of our values is our people, but we're seeing an issue with um, employee retention, within the industry, right? Then I can kind of, I'm starting to bridge some gaps on this may be a priority for you for half two, looking at your talent acquisition strategy and the potential costs associated with that. So I'm a big note taker.
Hmm.
And to me, it's kind of like a puzzle, right? I just kind of dig at the information like a detective until I can get somewhere interesting that I feel confident that I have a reason to be relevant to them to reach out.
And I think that part is, it's very easy when you have a quota or when you have top down leadership pushing you to book appointments or get appointments
Yeah.
where you can just like fire stuff out. I think there's a healthy balance, right? But what I like and what I always recommend is you do research, have your focus account. And if I'm going to do a focus
Mm-hmm.
account, if I'm going to get an executive, if I'm going to talk to somebody, talk to Candace, talk to you, for goodness sakes, I need to make sure that when I do get to that conversation, that it's something that's relevant as opposed to just like a plain old value prop. We have amazing CRMs and we can get you a great deal. Like I don't care for that. Like, and I think this is
Yeah.
this is where you can come in, like you said, those puzzle pieces, and that part resonates so much with me, like trying to figure it out. Because if I really need you then? If that's the case, I can go on your website and get that. But what I need is somebody to help me identify problems to solutions to problems that I know I have or maybe roughly aware of. But if you can help me to understand that, it makes it so much more for me to book an appointment with you and close larger deals. I've seen that time and time again.
Yeah. Well, and also too, you're setting the seeds up. You're planting the foundation because if you're going to drive a business case for change, you've
Yeah.
got to start with a really good hypothesis.
Ooh, one more
And
time for the folks
so,
in the back. One more time for the folks in the back on that one. That was like money. If you just came to this podcast and you only got one thing, that's it. One more time, Candace.
yes, if you were looking to drive a business case for change, you have to start with a really good hypothesis. There's no doubt, especially if you want to drive velocity in your deal. It's got to start somewhere strong. And like you said, it's a targeted focus. That's where
Hmm.
you're being more strategic. You're putting pieces together. You're going, business acumen is really about learning, and being curious, and having curiosity about the industry, about how that business is run, things you can find about it, what people are saying about that business on Glassdoor. I mean, you want to look at all these different layers around the business, um, to get a sense for what's happening so that you can start someplace really strong to say, hey, you're I don't know if this is a priority for you, but this is what I've found, and I'm really curious about, does this resonate?
Mm.
And I think that that's something that differentiates between noise. Like you said, a CRM system that does XYZ, it's not really exciting anymore, right? And businesses have people problems, they have financial problems and pressure, right? And so, what a software does isn't going to be particular interesting on a feature level. It's got to really drive an impact to be relevant to the organization and personal to the role of who you're reaching out to set them up for success.
the that part about the set them up for success. I often
Yeah.
find that sellers, and I'm putting myself in, so I won't generalize it. I often found that I did not do that part well. And I had to, I went through training and grateful and I was able to learn. But the key though was there are times where I ignored the individual's progress within an organization or individual politics and didn't necessarily understand that from a business perspective. Like say for instance, if you're talking to like a HR director, that person probably is not going to have goals to be an HR director forever. They probably want to get advancement in the organization. And what are some of the political things that may be at stake if this doesn't
Yeah.
work accordingly, or what can work? And I didn't pay attention to that part. I just focused on the organization as a whole. So your message there just resonate with that.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I think that's where we are now, right? Is you have a lot of people who, if they're going to move forward, I think we're seeing signs. You have a lot of people who are taking longer to buy because
Hmm.
they don't want to make the wrong decision,
Yeah.
and it costs them their job potentially, especially if it's a job that they're happy with, right? Or that they like. So
I want to keep
so
my job,
buying
Candace.
and some hey, some people really like it and want to do that, right?
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, nobody wants to seem like they can't do their job or they
Mm,
don't make a good decision or they don't steward resources well with the company. I think people really want to be set up for success. And what's hard as a seller is a lot of times, you have quotas, you have numbers, and you're thinking about it in those terms rather than thinking about, well, if I take this target approach and I focus on how I can set people up to win, then I can not only take broader objectives, right? But then I can also focus on a champion and help align with them and how those impacts their role. So I think something that's a helpful exercise for sellers to do, especially if you're reaching out to maybe a couple people within an organization when you're working more of an enterprise strategy, is level your objectives as well, right? We
mm,
talked about that CEO objective being very high level strategy, and as we roll down we get more tactical. So I think it's a fun exercise to write down titles and roles on a piece of paper and rewrite your value proposition as it aligns to their role to get really good at connecting the dots to eventually set them up for success, right? And it's understanding that you're meeting people where they are instead of doing that. I have got the same message for everybody.
yeah. Meet them exactly where they are. I love it. I love it. Good stuff. What advice you'd have? I know we're coming up to the end here. What advice do you have if I'm trying to become more effective in my role as a seller with my business acumen? You give us a lot of great things, but if there's a little piece left to close us out, what would that be?
It'd be practice writing. Um, Practice writing what objectives and goals differentiate at levels of the organization and how you connect that back to what's happening in an industry. So, what I would say is, practice writing your statements around how does this sound an executive level? If I think about an executive level, I'm focused on the organization, right? So, and actually, I'll take it back. Let's start from the let's start from the IC level. So, level one is IC. So, how does this affect an IC, and what's going to happen as an outcome for if they buy this solution and I solve this problem? And the second level is, what about a manager who's in charge of a team, and how does it impact that manager and the team? Then the third would be a director, and how are they driving initiatives for a business unit, right? Or an area of the business. And then a fourth, like getting on up into VP and executive level where you get more of those higher priorities. And so you want to move between, and if you're not familiar with other roles, start with sales. What's important to an IC salesperson? What's important to a sales manager? What's important to a sales director and a VP of sales, right? And then what's important to a CRO? What are the initiatives and objectives of a CRO? And rewrite those statements at each level in in a specific industry so that it starts to go and connect the dots for yourself of how you can reach out to those levels and feel confident that you can position each one of them for success or a reason to be relevant, and start with that strong hypothesis.
Oh, love it. Strong hypothesis, focus on what matters to them, do it, practice it a little bit beforehand, and write it out, be effective at writing it out. And if I can do some of these things, focus on those individuals and ask amazing
Yeah.
questions, I'll probably be a little bit further ahead, come understanding those priorities. I think you gave us enough to be able
Yeah.
to put us on. You gave us enough to go start some good problems.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I think the one thing I just want to see is people be successful, right, in
Hmm.
this time, and not be afraid to reach out, but just equip yourself to reach out and think
Yeah,
about it a little bit differently, right? Yes, you have quotas. Yes, you have numbers, but you can take a moment to be intentional about what you're doing and set yourself up for success when you do that.
love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Love it. Candace, if folks want to get in touch with you to connect further or to learn more about what you guys are doing, what's the best way for them to go about doing so?
LinkedIn's always a good place.
I love it. She responds to messages and she's active on LinkedIn. It's a great platform. That's how we
Yes.
connected. So,
Yes,
Candace,
absolutely.
thank you for taking time to come on our show today. Appreciate you.
Hey, thank you, Donald. I appreciate you.
Hey, that was Candace Taber. If you haven't connected with her as of yet, tell her that you found her here on the Sales Evangelist Podcast. Connect with her, and she'll be so grateful. I know she loves it. I know she'll appreciate you doing that. The concepts and principles here, one of the things that I love was just making sure you focus on the prospect, understanding the priorities. And I know that sounds general, focus on the prospect, but the individual, not just the company. What's beneficial to them? What's going to help them to be more successful in their role? What's going to help them to keep their jobs? Improve your business acumen with understanding everyone's responsibility. You can find this maybe on their company website to see if they have any open roles, but also just Googling it and make sure that when you do say a message, create a message that it ties directly to them and towards that benefit for them and to the organization. Listen, it was an amazing episode. Go back through it, share with other people, write things down. I did. As always, I want you to thrive and succeed. I want you to 3 to 5x your sales pipeline. I want you to close twice as many deals, and I want you to go out, raise your level of thinking, and do big things. See you on the next one.